Hey guys, and welcome back. Today I'm going to be making a very simple dog collar and leash, and for this I've got some very nice brass hardware, including this little buckle, this attachment here, a nice brass D-ring, and as well this little thing here, which will be very nice indeed. And to do this I've got two lanyards of, basically it's 2 centimeters wide. I've got no idea how much that is in inches, and it's about 3.5 millimeters thick. It is some vegetable tanned and quite nicely oiled vegetable tanned leather here, so that should be great for making a good dog collar. We'll put the hardware aside for now and concentrate on making the dog collar. The first thing I'll do is carve down these 10 centimeters here to give me something I can work with when folding this over. There you go. It's not the best skive I've ever done, but I've managed to get a nice little thin area here, which would be absolutely perfect once this is turned around to sit my buckle. I'm going to try and get it a bit thinner on the very end here, because this is the part that will be rubbing against the dog's neck. So I just want to make sure this is as thin as possible. There we go. That's pretty much perfect, or at least that's as far as I'm going to try getting it today. I'm going to mark out where my hole will be. Just about there. Now before I do anything else, I'm going to go ahead and bevel the edges along these sides because it's going to be harder to get to later on. Using this little punch tool, I'm going to punch out a hole for my buckle. And there you go. In theory, this should be just the right size. And that looks perfect. There you go. Actually guys, this is going to be a bit more than just a test fit, because I'm just going to start gluing straight from here. I'll let that dry for a couple of minutes, come back to it and stick it up. The glue is now tacky to the touch, so very carefully fold it over on itself, making sure that the two parts with the glue are actually touching. Go ahead and make sure that the edges are aligned by placing your fingers along the edges and squeeze tightly. At this point it doesn't need to be a perfect fit, it just needs to be close enough so you have room to stitch. In this build, and as in most of my builds, I'm using Maisie thread. Maisie is a company that produces this amazing waxed linen thread. It's incredibly tough and resistant, and it shouldn't budge whatever is thrown at this collar. This thread should last a huge amount of time. For my stitching, I'm going to be using my Crimson Hides pricking irons in the 3.25 millimeter spacing. This is the French tip, which means that it is slants, not diamonds. It is very sharp and should go through the 2 layers of leather with no problems whatsoever. Although this thread is already waxed, I do like to wax my thread again using just a big slab of beeswax here. This will help protect it even more against whatever might be thrown at it. I'm using a basic saddle stitch technique here to be able to stitch this leather, which should work brilliantly for years to come. I have to say guys, I am very pleased I skived this leather down, because already it's a pain to stitch, so I can't imagine if it had been the full size. Although that being said, I am double stitching everything, which doesn't really help matters make stitching easier at least. But this should at least give me as much strength as I might need in my build for it to last. Well, it's not perfectly straight, but since it'll be covered by another piece of leather once it's closed anyway, I'm not worried about that. Time to slot on the D-ring here, which should rest very nicely just below or just beneath the buckle. And again, I think it's time to glue. I'm going to mark out where my glue will be just to help me with my references. Again, you don't need much. The whole point here is mainly to just hold it in place while you're stitching, so you really don't need much glue here. Make sure you spread it out and get rid of any excess. There we go. And wait for it to dry. So once it's fully dried, don't forget to put your D-ring back in place and go ahead and glue. Same method as before. Make sure you line up those two ends and try and get rid of any excess glue on your edges here. It just never looks nice. And if you're going to be burnishing, in my case I'm not going to burnish this one, probably. I might later, but I don't think so. It's not a big deal if I get glue on the edges, but if you're burnishing, you really don't want glue on the edges because it's going to really interfere with your burnishing process. Okay, that should be held into place just strong enough for me to be able to go ahead and stitch. Once you're all stitched up, go ahead and slide what I like to call the belt keeper in this case, all the way up to that point there. Now I've already marked out where my glue is going to go, so all you have to do now is go ahead and glue up the remainder of your strap. I've gone ahead and skived the back side of this belt simply because it's got a sort of waxy protection on it already, and that's going to interfere my glue. And at this point I really want the glue to be bonding as best as possible here, since I don't want this part to come loose. Now I will be stitching it, but still I want to try and make sure that this stays as bonded as possible. So yes, I should have probably done this before, but the important part really here is not necessarily to skive off much, it's just to scratch up the surface and give that glue a place to rest. So there, here goes. And there you have it, all stitched up and ready to go, at least on this side. Now I measured my dog's, or at least my mother's dog's neck to be about 40 centimeters total, or at least that's the length I need in this strap. So I'm going to be cutting about 46-ish centimeters, giving myself some room to spare for the different holes that will be needed for adjusting the length of this strap. My piece is now cut to length, and I actually went ahead and used this specialized tool to punch the holes for the different adjustments. Now the holes are very close together, but that's normal, at least that's more or less intended, in the sense that this is a tool used for watch straps mainly, and I just felt I liked the look of this, so I wanted to give it a try and see how it looked. I think if I were to do it again, I'd probably do a more traditional method of spacing out and using my round punches, but I quite like the oval look on this tool, so I really wanted to try it out and have a bit of fun. This is what it looks like. Yeah, I'd love to know your thoughts in the comments below. It's going to be plenty strong enough anyway, even if there are quite a few holes in here, but I do like the look of it, and at least it will mean that adjusting this to the exact length you want should be easy enough to do. And the final step needed here is going to be beveling round the whole piece. Now to do the leash, I'm going to be, as you know, attaching this piece of brass hardware to the end of my second strap, folding it over, and so to be able to do that I need to skive it down, and I'll be able to then fold it over, so glue it up and stitch it up with the brass hardware in place. Now I don't need to skive it too far, I just want about 6 centimeters roughly to get some nice stitching going. I'll just mark out my lines for the glue up. There we go. I'm going to skive down just the top layer of this, just as I did before, simply because I want to expose the fibers underneath. Now I just want the smallest amount possible of leather off here. I want to keep the strength of that leather as much as possible. Just before I glue it up, let's go ahead and do these edges here. Round out these edges because I won't be able to have access to them easily later on. While that's drying up, I'm going to go and prep my other piece of leather to be able to make a handle. Now this is the leftover of the first strap, and it will also help to make the other strap longer basically. So to do this, the first thing I want to do is see where it would comfortably fit my hand. But as I'm saying that, I realized that these edges are very, very sharp actually, and I'm going to go ahead and bevel them. And I'm going to be using something a bit stronger than that one. This is a much wider edge beveler and will give me a much more comfortable hand rest here. But it is worth noting that I don't want to bevel too far. I want to maintain this area of contact. So I'm actually going to mark out where my leather sits right here, just to be able to get a good idea of where I want to bevel to. Okay. That being done, I'm actually going to go ahead and skive off this area first. I also want to skive off this area here, just very slightly again, just to expose those fibers, and it will also give me a guide to where to bevel to. And this gives me, as you can see, those two edges and guides basically to where to bevel to. Now while I was doing all that, this glue has had time to sit here and is now completely dry and ready to be glued up. So as always, line things up as best you can. Go ahead and apply lots of pressure, and in theory you should be good to go. And I'm glad to say it looks like theory has met practice today, as simply put, I am ready to go. Guys, I'm pleased to announce that the dog collar and leash are now ready, and the final thing I want to do here is go ahead and apply some really good strong, I don't even know if you'd call this wax or fat or grease or whatever it is, but it's basically, you probably know it under the name of dubbin, and I believe it's just very thick grease. And the reason I want to do this is because I want to make sure that this leather is as waterproof as possible. I'm not looking for a shiny finish here, I'm not looking for a perfect finish or a perfect surface. I'm really trying to protect it as much as possible, and this leather is relatively dry-ish. I mean, it's an oiled leather and it doesn't feel dry, but it's not necessarily going to last for years and years and years to come, because knowing the future owner, they're not going to really necessarily take care of it very much. It's a dog collar, you don't really think about that kind of thing. So I want to make sure that it is as carefree as possible for the rest of its life, and for that I'm going to add in as much of this oil or wax as I possibly can, or fat, I'm not too sure how to call it, to be honest with you guys, and you probably know more than I do, and I'm sure there's someone, a kind soul, who can explain to me exactly what this stuff is in the comments below. But whatever the case may be, I'm going to just be adding a nice big fat coat of it to the whole piece. Actually guys, I'm going to go at it with my fingers. I know this is very messy stuff, but I want to use the heat of my fingers to actually penetrate, or help the grease to penetrate into that leather as best as possible. And it also gives me a really good feel of where the grease has already been absorbed, like just here. I don't know if you can see that, but yeah, probably just about on camera you can probably make this out, where the grease is already being absorbed and could do with a second coat already. Yeah, it's quite surprising how fast this is absorbed into the leather. But yeah, so I'm not too unhappy or too displeased. Actually, I'm quite happy doing this, to be honest, because I really do think it will help give the leather a much, needed coat of protective oils and waxes. So yeah, and grease I should say, not oils. Of course I'll do the leash as well, which is a bit of a longer project here, so I'm going to be using lots of my oil stuff, lots of my grease. I keep calling it oil, it's not oil, it's grease. Okay, so I'm going to have to wash my hands with something quite strong when I get home, because I can feel this is not going to be easy to get off. Guys, I'm delighted to report that the dog collar and leash are now ready. Now these are, as a reminder, brass fittings with a nice 3.5mm thick waxed, oiled vegetable tanned leather strap. And yeah, hopefully the owner of this, the future owner of this, will really enjoy this. So yeah, of course this is the first time I've ever made a dog collar, so if you see anything that could be improved from future builds, please do let me know in the comments below. That would be highly appreciated. And if you're looking to make a dog collar like this, well, hopefully this video has helped you out and helped you understand a few different things and techniques maybe, but don't assume that this is the definitive way of doing things. This is just how I did it today. With that being said, guys, thanks a ton for joining me. It's been great to be able to have you along for this fun little project. Hopefully you've enjoyed, hopefully you've learned something, and hopefully I'll see you very soon for some more leathercraft.